It was supposed to be a quiet birthday lunch, nothing fancy. Just my daughter, my son-in-law, my niece, and a chocolate cake with too many candles. 70 years. 70 years of surviving, working, loving, losing. I thought I had seen it all. But I hadn't heard that sentence before. While I distract her, you go over to her place and change the locks. It slipped through the restaurant noise like a blade through silk, soft. Almost invisible, yet it cut straight through me. Faith, my only daughter, leaned across the table, whispering into her husband's ear. She thought I was too busy smiling for photos. Cutting the cake, my niece Audrey insisted on photographing from every angle. She thought the clinking silverware would cover her words. She was wrong. At first, I thought I had misheard. Surely my daughter wasn't plotting to lock me out of my own home on my birthday. But then I saw Grant's eyes flicker toward me, nervous, calculating, before he mumbled an excuse about going to the bank. Faith squeezed my hand, her face wrapped in sweetness. Mom, you look radiant today, 70 going on 50. Lies wrapped in sugar. I watched him walk away. Keys jingling. Faith lifted her wineglass subtly, almost like a signal, a code between conspirators. 50 minutes. That's how long it took him to come back. During those 50 minutes, my daughter became an actress. She showed me photos of the grandkids I already saw every week. She asked about my health, about my medicine, about whether I needed help with groceries. Her questions felt rehearsed, like lines she'd practiced in a mirror. Audrey, my sweet niece, chatted about her new job, innocent, unaware that a silent heist was unfolding between slices of cake and polite smiles. And I, the birthday girl, played along. I nodded, laughed, tasted every dish, my hands steady while my mind screamed. Outside, I was the picture of warmth. Inside, I was counting minutes, imagining the sound of a locksmith's drill chewing through the lock I had turned for 40 years. Then Grant returned. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Pale, sweating, hands shaking as he gripped his chair. Faith stood up immediately, panic breaking her mask. What happened? Why did you take so long? Grant looked at her, then at me, then back again. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. Something went wrong. Your mother, the house? He collapsed into his chair. Faith leaned closer, whispering urgently, thinking I couldn't hear, again. What do you mean went wrong? Did you do what we agreed? Grant's face twisted. I went there, with the locksmith. But the house isn't in your mother's name anymore. There were people inside, new owners. They showed me paperwork, notarized. The sale happened 3 weeks ago. Silence. Pure, heavy silence. Faith froze, her wineglass midair. I could see her mind breaking apart, trying to make sense of what she just heard. Then, slowly, she turned to me. I smiled, calm, serene. Yes, daughter, I sold it. Audrey blinked, confused. Wait, you sold your house? Faith's voice cracked, sharp with disbelief. When? Why didn't you tell us? 3 weeks ago, I said simply, and I didn't have to tell you. It was my house, my property, my decision. Grant sat still, eyes wide. Faith's face flushed red, not with embarrassment, but rage. That house was our inheritance. Mom, the only thing you were supposed to leave us. Her words hit me like acid, not because of what she said, but because they revealed what she really valued. That house was mine, Faith, not yours, not Grant's, mine. My voice came out stronger than I expected. The nearby tables had grown quiet. Audrey's fork hovered midair. Faith's tone turned cold. And where are you going to live now? Mom, did you sell your future too? I looked her in the eyes. I bought an apartment, smaller, easier to maintain, with 24-hour security. The money from the sale is in an investment account. Protected, generating income so I can live with dignity. She shot up from her chair, the wooden legs screeching against the floor. Grant tried to hold her arm, she shook him off. Do you have any idea how you've betrayed us? She hissed. I smiled again, this time without warmth. Betrayed you? 50 minutes ago, you sent your husband to change my locks. Her mouth opened, no words came out. The irony hung between us like smoke. I turned to Audrey, still frozen in disbelief. You didn't know, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. Then back to Faith. I didn't betray anyone. I protected what was mine. But as I said those words, a part of me ached. Not because of the house. Not even the money. It was because this woman, my only child, had become a stranger. To understand how I got here. Sitting in a restaurant watching my daughter's greed devour her humanity. We have to go back 42 years. Back to when I was 28, a widow with a 3-year-old girl in my arms and $60 to my name. That's where this story really began. I was 28 when the world ended with a phone call. Mrs. Thompson? I'm sorry, there was an accident at the site. 5 seconds, a falling beam, and Robert, the man who promised me a small garden, a steady paycheck, and a life without fear, never came home again. Grief is loud at first. People bring casseroles and platitudes. Then the noise fades, and you're left with bills, a child, and a silence so big it swallows your sleep. I had $60 when the landlord taped a notice to our door. Faith was 3 and clutched my shirt while I counted the money again. As if the numbers might change out of pity. The next morning I walked into St. Raphael General Hospital and asked for anything. They gave me a hairnet, gloves, and a cart of linens. $5 an hour. The night shift. The smell of disinfectant burrowed into my clothes and stayed. I learned the hospital's language by heart. The click of IV pumps. The low code alarms. The footsteps of tired nurses who moved like storm fronts, fast. Inevitable. I changed sheets, lifted bodies, mopped floors. Sometimes I'd push the cart past a room where a young wife held a husband's hand and I'd have to stop. Just for a breath. Before I kept moving. You don't choose resilience, you pay for it in small, quiet installments. Faith grew up under fluorescent lights. She learned to nap in chairs. To color quietly at 3 in the morning. To run down hallways without getting in anyone's way. The cafeteria ladies slipped her extra pudding cups. The night security guard knew her favorite sticker brand. When she started to read, she sounded out the posters about hand washing and fall risks like they were fairy tales. Every extra hour was a small brick. I put those bricks in a cookie tin under my mattress because I didn't trust banks. I trusted the weight of metal and the feel of paper. 3 years later there was $1,200. A number that looked like a door. I bought dirt. That's what everyone told me it was, just dirt. A lot on the edge of the city where the roads turned to gravel and the streetlights gave up early. No water, no electricity, just stubborn ground and a sky that didn't blink. The seller laughed when I handed him the cash. Lady, there's nothing there. There will be, I said. On Sundays, Faith and I took the bus to the lot and sat on stacked bricks while I argued with a foreman about every nail. Every plank, every delivery. He agreed to weekly payments. And I agreed to live with a hammer in my purse. When a worker cut corners, I noticed. When a supplier padded a bill, I caught it. I learned the language of foundations and joists, of permits and inspections. I discovered that the word no is a tool, not a confession of weakness. It took 4 years to raise that house from the dust. 4 years of sore feet and double shifts, of counting pennies and stretching soup. The day they finally framed the front door, I pressed Faith's palm against the studs and traced the outline with a pencil. This is home, I told her, not because it's pretty, but because it's ours. She was 12 when we moved in, old enough to roll her eyes at my speech and young enough to cry when she saw her own room. Electricity came with bribes that pinched my soul. Water came 2 years later when the city stretched its veins our way. I studied at night, medical terms in the margins of grocery lists. Nursing textbooks balanced beside a chipped mug. I failed an exam and took it again. I passed and kept going. I traded hairnets for scrubs. Carts for clipboards. $5 for 9, 9 for 12, 12 for 15. The raises didn't change who I was. They changed what I could say yes to. Why a private school? People asked when I signed Faith up. Because she deserves a head start I never had. I said, and I meant it. I patched my uniforms, wore out soles until rain found the holes. Faith never knew the taste of secondhand notebooks. I swallowed the difference. At 18, she said, I'm marrying Grant. Like a plan already sealed. He shook my hand with salesman eyes, wide, bright, slippery. He's got ambition, Faith said. I smiled and asked about his savings. He talked about dreams instead. I asked her to wait. To build something of her own before tying it to someone else. But you can't argue with a story a young heart writes for itself. I paid $3,000 for a roof that needed fixing because I wanted my daughter's wedding to feel like the start of something kind. Starts can be deceiving. When deals were scarce, Grant looked smaller. When bills grew teeth, he looked to Faith, and Faith looked to me. I didn't keep score, I kept receipts. 50 here, 100 there, school supplies, fevers, braces, just this once, Mom, became a calendar full of once. I told myself it was love. Sometimes love is just a rearrangement of your own hunger. Then came the lawsuit, Robert's brother. A ghost with paperwork. He claimed half the dirt under my house belonged to their father's estate. As if grief came with a deed. Lawyers speak in a language designed to exhaust women like me. I learned it anyway. 2 years in court, $32,000 in fees. Blood pressure that sang in my ears at night. I won. The judge said the land was mine. Bought fairly, no strings attached. I walked out blinking in the sun. Lighter and older at the same time. Faith didn't hug me. She studied me, calculating. It took weeks to name what I saw in her eyes, disappointment. Not because I spent money or aged in a hurry, because I kept what she thought would be hers. After that, her visits softened at the edges and sharpened at the center. The house is so big for you now. Mom, those stairs worry me. Have you thought about communities? They have ballrooms and yoga. I laughed the first time, me. A nurse. Paying $4,000 a month to be told when to stretch. She switched tactics. Articles appeared on my table about falls. Brochures collected like leaves. Grant started talking interest rates and liquidity. The way bankers say care but mean control. The word elderly entered our conversations like a stray cat they pretended was cute. At your age, began 100 sentences that ended with me being small enough to fit in their plans. I let the cat hiss. I never fed it. 3 months before my 70th birthday. The mask slipped. I stopped by Faith's place to drop off a sweater I'd knitted for my youngest grandson. The door was ajar. The house too quiet. Their voices floated from the study. I wasn't snooping, I was leaving, until I heard the word guardianship spoken with a lawyer's calm. I stood in the hallway. Invisible. An accident, a hospitalization, a temporary incapacity. The man said, then petition the court. You'll manage her assets. Sell property if needed. It's for her well-being. She's clear-headed, Faith said, and my heart flinched at the truth in her voice. That's why it must be temporary. The man replied, get neighbor statements. Document forgetfulness. Confusion. Concern. Concern. Grant repeated, like a word he could sell. I left without knocking. Sweater in my hands. Chest tight as a fist. I didn't cry. Tears solve things only in novels. Real life requires a lawyer of your own. A real estate agent who doesn't ask the wrong questions. And a plan built with the clean lines of a blueprint. The next morning, I hired both. Emily, the agent, had honest eyes and a clipboard. Your place is worth $185 to $200 in this market. She said, fast and discreet? 3 weeks, I told her. Doable, she nodded. Cash buyers exist when a house has a soul. It took less than that. A young couple expecting their first child walked through the door I'd once framed around Faith's tiny hand. Brenda touched the kitchen counter like it was a promise. We'll take care of it, she said. I believed her. I signed where the notary pointed. I opened accounts my daughter could never touch. I rented a small apartment with a doorman and cameras and a window that caught morning light like a net. I moved in quiet, at night, carrying only what mattered, documents, photographs, a painting I loved, the sweater I never delivered. I kept my old phone active and answered Faith's texts with polite fog. I'm fine, busy. I gave my real number to 2 people, my lawyer and the woman at the front desk who always smiles like a secret. I slept through the night for the first time in months. You might think that's where the fear ended. It isn't. Fear doesn't leave, it sits in the corner and watches. But peace has a louder voice when you've built it yourself. And because greed hates being ignored, it came to find me. First, a frantic call from the new owners, Grant at my old doorstep with a locksmith and a story about picking up my mother's things. Then a swarm of voicemails. Blooming like mold. Accusations. Pleas. Threats wrapped in concern. Then nothing, the most dangerous sound of all. Silence means planning. When the court papers arrived, a petition questioning my mind, my choices, my right to my own life, I put on my best suit and made tea. I'd been preparing for their day. They didn't know I already had mine. The papers came on a Thursday morning, a thin envelope with a heavy intention. When I opened it, the words glared back like a cruel joke. Petition for temporary guardianship, Faith Thompson. Daughter. So this was it. They weren't just thinking about it anymore. They had actually done it. I sat down, the letter trembling slightly in my hands, not from fear, but from the weight of déjà vu. 40 years ago, I fought to keep my home from my brother-in-law's false claim. Now, I had to defend it again, but this time, from my own blood. My lawyer, Dr. Chris Miller, called that same afternoon. His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the edge of disbelief when he said, "Your daughter alleges confusion, irrational decisions, and social withdrawal. She's asking the court to assign her temporary control over your financial and medical affairs." "She wants my life," I said quietly. "All of it." He sighed. "Mrs. Thompson, they've even included a list of supposed witnesses, neighbors claiming you were seen disoriented. Forgetful, talking to yourself. Lies," I muttered. "Of course," he said, "but we'll need to prove their lies. A psychological evaluation, a social worker visit, and documentation of your daily independence. If you have nothing to hide, this will be straightforward." "Nothing to hide," I repeated, "only everything to lose." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window of my small apartment, the city humming below, thinking of the daughter I once carried on my back while mopping hospital floors. How did that child, my Faith, grow into someone who could weaponize the law against her own mother? Maybe it started the first time I said no. Blank, underscore, blank. 3 days later, the psychologist came. Dr. Francis Williams, gray-haired, kind-eyed, but sharp as a scalpel. He asked questions designed to make you stumble, memory tests, logic puzzles, proverb meanings, dates, math problems. He tried to see if my mind wavered. It didn't. "Mrs. Thompson," he said finally, glancing over his clipboard, "your cognitive performance is well above average. You show no signs of dementia, confusion, or decline of any kind." I smiled faintly. "Would you mind writing that down?" He chuckled. "Already have. My report will be submitted to the court." The next visitor was a young woman named Emily Miller, the social worker. She arrived unannounced, polite but observant, carrying a tablet and a careful smile. "I need to see your living conditions," she said. "Of course," I replied. She checked the kitchen, spotless. The refrigerator, stocked. She opened cabinets, glanced at the medicine shelf, all organized, all current. She walked through the bedroom, the bathroom, the tiny living room, taking notes. Then she looked at me. "You live here alone?" "Yes." "And you handle all shopping, cleaning, cooking?" "I've been doing it for 70 years. I think I've mastered it." Her mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Why did you move from your previous home?" I looked straight into her eyes. "Because I overheard my daughter and her husband planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could take it away. I sold it before they could." Emily froze for a heartbeat, then nodded slowly. "That's serious." "It's the truth," I said, "and now, they're doing exactly what I heard them plan to do." She typed for a long moment. "I believe you, but what matters is the evidence, and you have plenty. My report will reflect what I've seen here. You're independent, healthy, capable. I'll recommend that the guardianship petition be dismissed." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without pain. Blank, underscore, blank. 2 weeks later came my 70th birthday. I didn't plan to celebrate. How could I with a lawsuit hanging over my head? But Audrey insisted. "Aunt Dolores, you can't let Faith steal your birthday. Come on, just a small lunch. My treat." I finally agreed, but on one condition. She wouldn't tell Faith or Grant where we'd meet. We picked a quiet downtown restaurant. One with old wood tables and sunlight that made everything look softer. Audrey brought a little chocolate cake and a candle shaped like the number 70. "Make a wish, Auntie," she said, smiling. I didn't tell her what I wished for. It wasn't forgiveness or peace. It was clarity. Halfway through lunch, as we were laughing about her travel plans, I felt the air shift, that strange electricity that precedes a storm. And then I saw her. Faith. Walking in with Grant right behind her. My heart dropped, not out of fear, but disappointment that even here, in this small piece of peace, she had found a way to intrude. "Aunt," Audrey whispered, pale. I didn't tell them, I swear. She must have looked at my phone when. "It's okay," I said softly. "Let's see what performance they brought today." Faith reached our table, voice dripping honey and venom. "Mom, what a surprise seeing you here. Celebrating your birthday without your own daughter?" "I'm not surprised you came uninvited," I said. "It seems to be your specialty lately." Grant dragged over a chair and sat beside her. Audrey stared down at her plate, wishing herself invisible. Faith crossed her arms. "We need to talk." "No," I replied. "You need to listen." Her lips tightened. "You sold our family home without telling us. You've cut off all contact. You're acting irrational, paranoid." "Irrational?" I interrupted. "Funny how that's the same word your lawyer used in the guardianship documents." Her face flickered, just for a second, then reset into practiced concern. "I filed those papers because I'm worried about you. Any daughter would. Any daughter who wanted her mother's bank account," I said coldly. Grant tried to calm things. "Dolores, please, we're all just concerned. You've isolated yourself. You made a massive financial decision without guidance." "It was my house," I said. "My money, my decision. I didn't need guidance, especially not from thieves." The restaurant had gone silent now. All forks suspended mid-air. Faith's mask cracked. The sweet daughter was gone, replaced by the woman who'd been hiding underneath. "You're out of control, Mom. That house was our inheritance." "It was mine," I cut in sharply. "Not yours. Not until I die, and apparently, you couldn't wait that long." The words hit her like a slap. Grant's face reddened. Audrey's eyes filled with tears. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. "Enjoy your lunch," I said, laying a few bills on the table. "I have a hearing to prepare for, the one where your lies will collapse." Faith's voice trembled. "This isn't over, Mom." "No," I said, turning toward the door. "It's just beginning." The courthouse smelled of old paper and polished wood. Like every truth ever spoken, there still lingered in the air. I arrived half an hour early, dressed in the gray suit I'd ironed 3 times the night before. Simple, clean, deliberate. I wanted the judge to see me as what I was, a woman in full command of her own life. Dr. Miller, my lawyer, greeted me in the hallway with a reassuring smile. "You ready?" he asked. "More than ready," I said, though my heart was beating hard enough to rattle the pearls around my neck. Faith and Grant arrived 15 minutes later, walking like they owned the place. Her chin lifted high, his hand on her back. The perfect picture of false concern. Their lawyer, Harvey Black, wore an expensive suit and the smug confidence of a man used to bending truth until it obeyed. They didn't look at me directly, but I could feel their eyes scanning for weakness, a trembling hand. An unsteady step, anything they could twist into evidence of decline. They would find nothing. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He was an older man with gray hair, heavy glasses, and the calm of someone who'd seen every family destroy itself at least once. "Good morning," he said, his voice echoing. "We are here to consider the petition for temporary guardianship filed by Ms. Faith Thompson over her mother. Mrs. Dolores Thompson, let's proceed." Harvey stood first, his tone smooth and rehearsed. "Your Honor, my client has come here out of deep concern for her mother's well-being. Over the past year, Mrs. Thompson has exhibited troubling signs of confusion and impulsive behavior. She sold her longtime residence without consulting anyone, moved to an undisclosed location, and refuses communication with her family. These are not the actions of a sound mind." I sat perfectly still as he spoke, letting his words slither through the air like smoke. He talked about me as if I wasn't there, as if I were a case file, not a woman. We have witness statements, he continued, neighbors who saw her wandering at odd hours, forgetting conversations, expressing paranoia that her family wanted to harm her. We only seek what's best for her, a temporary guardianship, to ensure her safety and protect her assets from exploitation. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile meant for juries, not truth. When he finished, the judge turned to Dr. Miller. Defense. My lawyer Rosé, calm and certain, his voice cutting through the air like clean glass. Your Honor, what you've just heard is not concern. It's calculation. Mrs. Thompson is a retired nurse with 40 years of professional experience, impeccable employment records, and no medical history of cognitive decline. The so-called confusion? It's called independence. The so-called paranoia? It's called survival. He placed a folder on the table. Here you will find the psychological evaluation from Dr. Francis Williams, a certified forensic psychiatrist. It concludes that Mrs. Thompson's cognitive abilities are well above average for her age, with no sign of dementia, delusion, or impairment. We also submit the social worker's report, conducted by court appointment, confirming she lives alone, manages her own finances, and maintains her home in excellent condition. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the documents. His face was unreadable. Mrs. Thompson, he said, looking directly at me, I'd like to hear from you personally. Please stand. I stood, smoothing my jacket. My voice came out steady. Your Honor, I sold my house because I discovered that my daughter and her husband were planning to have me declared incompetent. I overheard them speaking with a lawyer about fabricating evidence, false claims of forgetfulness, confusion, even testimony from neighbors. They wanted control of my assets. So, I did the only rational thing I could. I sold the house, secured the money under legal protection, and moved somewhere safe. Faith shot up from her seat. That's not true, she shouted. She's lying. We would never. Silence. The judge said sharply, you'll have your turn. I kept going. I've worked since I was 28. Your Honor, I built that house brick by brick. I supported my daughter, paid for her wedding, her children's education. I fought lawsuits, paid debts, survived grief. I did all of that with my own mind, the same mind I'm using right now to defend myself. I'm not confused. I'm tired. Tired of being treated like a problem to be managed instead of a person to be respected. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the clock tick. Even Harvey looked uneasy. The judge studied me for a long moment before turning back to Faith. Ms. Thompson, he said, do you have concrete medical evidence that your mother lacks capacity? A clinical diagnosis? A doctor's note? Anything beyond these alleged statements from neighbors? Harvey cleared his throat. Your Honor, we were unable to obtain formal evaluations before the petition, so. No? The judge interrupted. Not at this time, Your Honor. The judge closed the folder with a loud thud. He leaned forward, his gaze heavy. I've reviewed the evidence, the evaluations, and the reports. Mrs. Thompson is mentally competent, financially responsible, and capable of managing her own life. This court finds no basis for guardianship, not temporary, not permanent. He looked straight at Faith. What I do see is a daughter who, perhaps out of fear or perhaps out of greed, has tried to control what was never hers. Concern is not a legal reason to strip someone of their freedom. The sound of the gavel hitting wood was like thunder. Petition denied. Faith went pale. Grant's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I stood there for a moment, breathing, letting the weight of victory settle quietly in my bones. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Outside, the sunlight felt different, warmer, cleaner, as if it had been waiting for me. Dr. Miller shook my hand. You did perfectly, he said. You didn't just win, Mrs. Thompson. You made them listen. I looked back at the courthouse doors. Faith and Grant stood there frozen, watching me walk away, their faces twisted in disbelief. I told you, I said softly, more to myself than to them. You can't steal from someone who built herself from nothing. That night, I sat by my window, the city lights flickering below. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not the fragile kind that can be taken away, but the kind that grows from surviving the worst. My phone buzzed. Faith's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring. Then I turned it off. Some victories don't need words. Just silence. The kind that says, I am still here. And I am free. The gavel's echo stayed with me for days. Every night, when the city quieted and the light from the street bled softly through my curtains, I could still hear that sound, one sharp knock that meant I was free. But freedom, I would soon learn, never comes without a cost. At first, the silence after the hearing felt like mercy. No calls, no knocks, no letters. I woke early, brewed coffee, watched the morning light slide across the floor, and told myself it was over. That they had finally understood. That maybe, just maybe, Faith would accept defeat and leave me to the peace I had fought for. But people like my daughter don't accept loss, they rearrange it. The first message came a week later. Mom, please, let's talk. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I deleted it. The second came the next day. I just want to understand why you hate me. I deleted that too. Then came the third. If you think this is over. It's not. That one, I saved. Not out of fear, out of clarity. When you stop feeding a parasite, it doesn't die quietly. 2 weeks passed before Audrey visited. She brought groceries and that warm, guilty smile she always wore when she talked about her cousin. Aunt Dolores, she said carefully. Faith told everyone the judge made a mistake. That you're being manipulated by your lawyer. That you're confused. Of course she did, I said. A lie needs oxygen. And she's running out of air. She's not taking it well. Audrey continued. They had to move to a smaller apartment. Grant lost some clients. And she's angry. Not just angry, humiliated. I sipped my tea slowly. Maybe humiliation is a fair teacher. Audrey looked at me, eyes soft. Do you ever feel sorry for her? I thought about that for a moment. I used to. For 40 years, I felt sorry for her, every time I paid a bill she couldn't. Every time I said yes when I should have said no. But pity is expensive, Audrey. It costs pieces of your soul. I can't afford that anymore. After she left, I opened my old phone, the one I kept for Faith's messages. There were 20 unread texts, each a different shape of manipulation. Pleading, accusing, begging, threatening. The last one said, "You'll regret this. Blood is blood." I turned the phone off and placed it in a drawer. I had no blood left to give her. Weeks passed. I fell into a rhythm that felt like living, not surviving. Morning walks, lunch with other women in the building, widows, nurses, retired teachers, women who knew what it meant to rebuild quietly. One of them, Brenda, lived 3 floors up. Over tea, she told me her own story, how her son had tried to put her in assisted living to sell her house. They call it protection, she said, but what they mean is possession. We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from shared scars. You fought back, I said. So did you, she replied. We're the generation that raised wolves and expected lambs. She was right. Maybe we made it too easy for them, giving them everything we never had. Teaching them comfort before conscience. And now they think love means ownership. 3 months after the hearing, a letter arrived. My name was written in the same handwriting I had memorized the day Faith first learned to write her own. My hands hesitated before opening it. Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me. But things have been hard. The kids need new uniforms. Grant lost his job. We're trying, but it's been difficult. Please help us, just this once. For your grandchildren. Just this once. The same phrase she'd used since she was 19. Just this once turned into decades of sacrifice. Just this once had built a house, bought groceries, paid hospital bills. I read the letter twice. Then I tore it neatly down the middle and dropped it into the trash. It wasn't anger. It was closure. 2 months later, Audrey came again, smiling brighter this time. You'll never believe it, she said. Faith got a part-time job as a receptionist. Grant finally started working properly, real clients. Real effort. I think losing that case woke them up. I nodded. Sometimes rock bottom is the only solid ground people ever find. She hesitated. Do you think she'll ever apologize? I don't need her to. I said. I didn't fight for an apology. I fought for peace. That night, I stood by the window with a glass of wine, watching the city's lights blink like stars pretending to be close. 71 years old. 43 years since I was widowed. I had learned that freedom doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. You did the right thing. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes after surviving betrayal. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of knowing too much. You stop expecting kindness to come from where it should. You start finding it in small places, a stranger's smile, a quiet morning, a room that's entirely yours. That's where I live now, in the small, peaceful spaces built from my own strength. One afternoon, as I was painting, I'd taken up landscapes recently, my phone buzzed. A message from Audrey, a photo of my grandchildren. They were smiling, sunburned from some summer trip, holding ice cream cones bigger than their faces. I stared at that photo for a long time, not with bitterness, but something quieter, something almost like forgiveness. Maybe one day they'll come to me. Maybe they'll want to know the truth. Maybe they'll understand that love isn't measured in what you give, but in what you refuse to lose. Or maybe they won't. Either way, I've made peace with it. I set the photo as my wallpaper and went back to my painting, a sunset over a city skyline. Warm light spilling across the canvas. I painted until the sun outside disappeared. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old, I just felt alive. Sometimes, freedom doesn't look like escape. It looks like staying exactly where you are, and knowing no one can take it from you again. It began with the knocks, soft at first. Hesitant, as if whoever stood behind the door was unsure whether to hope or to flee. I didn't move, I simply waited, brush still in hand, paint drying on the canvas beside me. After the third knock, I heard her voice. Mom, it's me. Even after everything, hearing her call me that stirred something ancient in me, not forgiveness. Not yet, but a tremor of memory. The nights I carried her feverish body through the rain to the hospital. The mornings I cut coupons so she could eat a little better than I did. Love, I've learned, doesn't die when it should. It lingers, stubborn and quiet, even in the face of betrayal. Please open the door, she said again. I'm not here to fight. I took a breath, long and steady, and walked toward the door. When I opened it, she stood there, thinner, tired, her eyes swollen from too many nights spent crying or pretending not to. She wasn't wearing makeup, and the arrogance that had once wrapped around her like perfume was gone. Hi, Mom. Faith, my voice came out colder than I intended. But honesty has no temperature control. Can I come in? I stepped aside. 5 minutes. She entered slowly, her gaze darting around the small apartment, the walls covered with my paintings. The vase of fresh lilies on the table. The sunlight spilling through clean curtains. It's nice, she said softly, smaller than the house, but cozy. It's home, I replied. She nodded, her hands twisting together. Grant's gone, she said suddenly. He left 2 months ago. Said he couldn't deal with the stress anymore. The lawsuit, the debts, me. I didn't answer. I got a job, full-time this time, at the dental clinic. The kids are with me. She tried to smile, but it came out cracked. We're managing. Good, I said simply. Mom, I didn't come for money. Her voice trembled. I came because I don't know how to live with what I did. I sat down, watching her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was finally seeing her without the armor of entitlement. You tried to take everything from me, I said quietly. My home, my name, my right to breathe without permission. Do you understand that? She nodded, tears already spilling. I do, and I hate myself for it. I don't even know who that person was. I thought I was protecting you, but really, I was scared. Scared of losing what little stability I thought I had. Scared that you'd give it all away before I could make sense of my own life. I told myself it was love. But it was greed. I see that now. The words hung between us, raw, clumsy, but real. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a bridge you rebuild, plank by plank, and some parts never fit the same again. Do you know what hurt the most? Faith? I asked. It wasn't that you wanted the house. It was that you didn't think I'd notice. You thought you could erase me while I was still alive. That's what I can't forget. I know, she whispered, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. Out loud. For a moment, Neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the muffled noise of city traffic below. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "What is that?" "Something I should have done long ago." She placed it on the table, a photo. Me holding her as a baby in front of the half-built house. Both of us smiling, covered in dust and sunlight. Behind it was a note written in shaky handwriting, "I'm sorry, Mom, for forgetting who built the ground I walked on." Tears burned my throat before I could stop them. I looked at the photo. Then at her. "You were so small that day," I said, voice breaking. "You kept running through the mud and laughing. Robert would have loved to see you like that." "I remember that story," she said softly. "You told it every birthday." I nodded. "And you stopped listening every year after 12. She gave a weak laugh through her tears. "You always know how to stab with truth, don't you?" "Truth doesn't stab," I said. "It disinfects." She stood up, wiping her face. "I should go." "You haven't had tea." "I didn't come for tea. I just wanted to say what I needed to say. I'll leave now." As she reached the door, I spoke. "Faith." She stopped. "I don't hate you, but I can't trust you yet. If you want to make peace with me, don't bring apologies, bring consistency. Live differently. Show me you can be better without needing my permission." She nodded slowly. "I'll try." "No," I said. "Don't try. Just do." She left quietly, closing the door behind her. I stood there for a long while, staring at the space she'd just occupied. The air still smelled faintly of her perfume, that same scent she used to wear when she was a teenager. Sneaking out to parties I never knew about until years later. The years loop back on themselves sometimes, like ghosts revisiting their favorite rooms. Later that night, I sat by the window again, the photo lying beside me. For the first time in months, I felt something different, not the sharp ache of betrayal, but the soft pulse of possibility. Maybe redemption, like aging, doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds slowly, quietly, the way dawn replaces night, one hesitant light at a time. Outside, the city glowed. Somewhere, a siren wailed, a baby cried. Life kept moving. I thought about what I told her, that I didn't hate her. It was true. I didn't hate her. I just refused to let her mistakes define my last years. And yet, deep down, a small part of me hoped she'd keep her promise. That one day, when the knocking returned, it would sound less like guilt and more like love finding its way home again. Peace is fragile. You think it's something you've earned, a steady breath after years of choking, but the truth is, peace must be guarded, every single day. It had been nearly a year since the courtroom. Faith hadn't returned after that afternoon in my apartment. No calls, no letters, only silence, the good kind this time. The kind that lets you rebuild without glancing over your shoulder. I spent my mornings painting, my afternoons walking through the park, and my evenings sharing tea with Brenda and the other women who had become my chosen family. We called ourselves the Survivors Circle, widows, mothers, nurses, teachers, all women who had been stolen from in one way or another and learned to steal themselves back. Then, one morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was young, trembling. "Is this Mrs. Thompson?" "Yes." "This is Officer Daniels with the city police. Your daughter, Faith, she's been in an accident." The words froze me mid-breath. For a second, I was back in that old hospital corridor 40 years ago, hearing the nurse say, "I'm sorry. We did everything we could." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Is she alive?" "She is. Minor injuries, but her children were with her. One of them," he paused. "Your grandson is in surgery." My knees went weak. Which hospital? When I arrived at St. Raphael, the same hospital where I'd spent most of my life working, the air smelled exactly as it used to, antiseptic. Metal. Fear. I found Faith in the waiting area, sitting alone, hands clasped together, eyes red and swollen. She looked up, startled, like a child who had seen a ghost. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't hesitate. I went to her and wrapped my arms around her. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Sometimes, silence is the only language pain understands. Her younger son, Jacob, had broken his leg and suffered a mild concussion. He would recover. The doctors said he was lucky. I stayed with them through the night, fetching water, talking to nurses, reminding them to double-check medication dosages like I used to do myself. Old habits never die, they just wait for the right moment to return. At dawn, when Jacob finally fell asleep, Faith and I sat in the hospital cafeteria. The morning light filtered through the windows, washing the room in gold. "Why did you come?" she asked quietly. "Because you're my daughter," I said. She nodded, tears welling again. "I didn't think you would. I didn't think you'd ever need me again," I admitted, "but here we are." She stared at her coffee for a long time. When the car hit us, all I could think about was how I'd never get the chance to tell you again that I'm sorry. That I know now what you meant, about living with dignity. About protecting what's yours. I've been working hard, Mom. I paid off the debts. The kids are doing better. I'm trying to fix what I broke. Her words were trembling but real. I watched her, this woman who had once been my greatest wound, and saw something I hadn't seen in years: humility. "Faith," I said softly, "you don't need to fix me. You just need to fix yourself. That's enough." She smiled through tears. "Do you think, someday, you could forgive me?" I took her hand. "Forgiveness isn't a door that swings open in one push. It's a path. Keep walking. Maybe I'll meet you halfway." That day, we sat together for hours, talking about simple things: her job, the kids, old recipes she used to love. Every now and then, we'd both fall silent, and that silence felt less like distance and more like healing. When Jacob was discharged a week later, Faith hugged me tight before leaving. "I'll call you, Mom," she promised, not to ask for anything, just to talk. And she did. At first, once a week, then twice. Her voice sounded lighter each time. She told me about her new manager who praised her work, about how she'd enrolled in an evening course to finish the degree she once abandoned. It was small progress, but it was progress. I didn't trust it immediately. Trust needs proof. Not promises, but I listened. And slowly, her words began to sound less like performance and more like truth. One afternoon, months later, she came by with Jacob and her older son, Liam. They brought flowers, sunflowers, my favorite, and a homemade card that said, "We love you, Grandma." The boys ran around the apartment, touching everything, laughing, filling the space with a warmth I hadn't realized I'd missed. Faith stood by the window, watching them. "I don't deserve this," she said quietly. "No," I said, "but you're earning it." She looked at me then, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. And for the first time, I saw my daughter, not the woman who betrayed me, but the girl I once held against my chest while the world fell apart. That evening, after they left, I sat by the same window, the sun setting behind the skyline, and thought about how strange forgiveness is. It doesn't erase the past, it repurposes it. The pain becomes a border, a line you never cross again. But also a reminder of where you began. I picked up my paintbrush and dipped it in gold. On the canvas before me was the outline of a house, not the one I built decades ago, but something smaller, softer, surrounded by light. I painted the windows wide open. For the first time, I wanted them that way. Life, I realized, wasn't about keeping people out. It was about learning who you could let back in. A year later, I turned 72. There was no courtroom, no shouting, no manipulation, only the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, and the soft hum of the kettle boiling in my kitchen. The walls around me were lined with my paintings now: bright skies, blooming gardens, quiet oceans. Each one told a piece of my story, not of what was taken, but of what I reclaimed. Audrey arrived early that morning, carrying a chocolate cake with white frosting and a dozen candles. 72, she said, laughing, and stronger than anyone I know. Stronger, I said, pouring tea, because I finally stopped letting people drain my strength. Not long after, there was another knock on the door. A softer one this time, cautious, respectful. Faith stood there, holding a small box wrapped in paper covered with hand-drawn flowers. Beside her were Jacob and Liam, smiling shyly. "Happy birthday, Grandma," they said in unison. I smiled. "Come in." Faith looked uncertain, almost waiting for rejection, but I opened the door wider, and she exhaled a breath she seemed to have been holding for a year. They sat around my small table, laughter mixing with the smell of chocolate and tea. The boys showed me their school drawings. One was a picture of a house with a woman standing in front of it, smiling, her silver hair glowing like sunlight. "That's you, Grandma," Jacob said proudly. "You have the strongest heart." I nearly cried, not from sadness, from something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or relief that the love I thought had died had simply been buried under the noise of greed, waiting to be uncovered. Faith handed me the box. "It's nothing expensive," she said, voice trembling, "just something that means something." Inside was a silver key on a chain. Simple, elegant. "A key?" I asked, smiling. "To your first home," she said. "The Martinezes sold it last month. They found my number through the real estate agent and wanted to tell you that your old garden still blooms. The new owners planted roses around the porch. I thought you might want to keep this, a piece of it." I ran my fingers over the cool metal, the edges smooth from decades of use. "You kept this all this time?" She nodded. "I found it when I was packing after the divorce. I couldn't throw it away. I thought about you every time I saw it." There was a silence then, the kind that feels sacred. Audrey watched us quietly, her eyes bright. The boys giggled as they licked frosting from their fingers. Outside, sunlight poured through the window, painting the room gold. "Mom," Faith whispered, "thank you for opening the door that day. I don't think I ever told you what that meant." "You didn't have to," I said softly. "I knew." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You were right about everything. About dignity. About fighting for yourself. I used to think strength meant control. Now I know it means letting go." I squeezed her hand gently. "And forgiving yourself," I said. "That's the hardest part." The rest of the afternoon passed in laughter and soft conversation. No tension, no rehearsed politeness. Just family, imperfect, scarred, but real again. When they left, Faith hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'll keep walking that path. Mom, I promise." I watched them go, the sound of their voices fading down the hallway. When the apartment fell silent again, I looked at the key in my hand, the symbol of everything I once lost, and everything I had since gained. I placed it on my windowsill, where the evening light could touch it. That night, as the city shimmered outside, I thought back to the beginning, to the betrayal over the birthday cake. The whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. The plan that would have stripped me of my home, my freedom, my dignity. If I had stayed silent then, if I had chosen comfort over confrontation, I would have lost everything that made me who I am. But I didn't. I chose silence of a different kind, not submission, but strategy. I didn't scream. I didn't fight with words. I let the truth do the talking. That was my revenge. Not the loud kind that burns everything in its path, but the quiet kind that builds something unbreakable from the ashes. I raised my glass of wine to the empty room. "To peace," I whispered, "to every woman who ever had to stand alone just to remember who she was." The wind moved the curtains, and for a second, it felt like the house itself was answering back, a soft sigh. A promise that everything I fought for had been worth it. Later that week, Brenda and the women from the survivors' circle came over. We sat in my living room, candles flickering, laughter filling the air. Brenda raised her glass and said, "To Dolores, proof that the quietest victories are the loudest in the soul." We toasted, and I felt warmth spread through me, not the heat of battle, but the glow of peace earned honestly. Before bed, I looked once more at the silver key on the windowsill. I realized it no longer belonged to a house. It belonged to me, a reminder that freedom isn't something someone gives you, it's something you claim and defend, even from those you love. I turned off the lights, lay down, and let sleep find me. No fear, no noise, only peace. And for the first time in 40 years, I didn't dream of the past. I dreamed of open doors. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need flames, or chaos, or broken hearts. Sometimes, revenge is silence. The kind that comes when you walk away, when you choose peace over pain, and dignity over destruction. Dolores didn't destroy her daughter. She simply stopped allowing herself to be destroyed. And that was enough. In a world where too many people confuse love with control, Her story reminds us. Real love respects freedom. And real strength is knowing when to let go. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from ashes, then you already understand what Dolores felt. That quiet kind of justice that doesn't need an audience. Thank you for watching Revenge in Silence. Every story here is more than revenge, it's a journey back to self-worth. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment sharing what this story meant to you. And tell us, what would you have done in Dolores's place? Until next time. Stay strong, stay silent, and let your peace be your loudest answer.